Hi, I'm Michelle Stetlick of the Hall County Historical Society. And while the story I want to share with you today didn't actually happen in this building, it did happen in one that looked similar to this, just a few blocks west of here. So we want you to come inside and hear about the story of Grand Island's forgotten World War I Red Cross canteen. While war had been raging in Europe for several years, the United States had stayed out of the fray. That was until April 6, 1917, when President Woodrow Wilson declared war. From that point on, Americans had two choices according to the government. They could join the Army in khaki and fight, or forgo and sacrifice and be part of the 100 million Army, the great back of the Army that would support the war efforts. In the 19 months that followed Wilson's declaration, more than 1 million soldiers and sailors joined the expeditionary forces. That was 1/4 of the U.S. population of males between the ages of 18 and 34. The 100 million Army was the rest of the population. At the time, the U.S. population was about 104 million people. So again, everyone was involved in the war effort. They had to be involved in the war effort according to the government, or they could be considered allies of the Kaiser. Clara Barton had established the Red Cross in 1881, but it really wasn't until 1917 that Red Cross chapters would spring up across the country. In April 1917, the Red Cross consisted of 555 chapters with approximately 486,000 members. By the end of the war, the Red Cross had 3,874 chapters with 30 million members. The ladies of Grand Island and Hall County wasted no time in establishing a Red Cross. They met 4 days after the declaration of war at St. Stephen's Church. They got together, they elected committees, elected temporary officers, and took the first steps to ask for a charter. They submitted their charter on April 10, 1917. And then they were told that women couldn't ask for a charter. So 4 days later, the ladies got their husbands together to formally request a Red Cross charter in Hall County. The Hall County Red Cross actually has 3 different dates that they consider the origin: April 6th, April 10th, and April 16th, when the executive committee was formed and the committees were established. At that point, residents of Hall County were busy. They were knitting socks and sweaters, rolling bandages, preparing comfort kits, and raising money for the Red Cross. One of the things that they weren't prepared for, though, was the coming of the troop trains. In the early days of mobilization, it wasn't apparent that there was going to be a need to feed soldiers along the way. The Army had dining rooms that were expected to feed the soldiers as they were being transported from camps in the west to the eastern seaboard. But what the Army quickly realized was the distance between the Army dining rooms was too far between. Soldiers were becoming hungry. As they were stopping at railroad depots across the country, soldiers were looking for food, searching out wherever they could find. The Red Cross started to step up and serve sandwiches, chocolate bars, cookies, and whatever they could find to the soldiers along the way. The Army recognized this incredible need and asked the Red Cross to go all the way. It took some time, almost a year actually, for the Red Cross to be fully operational. But it also took some time to prepare the soldiers in the basic camps to go to the eastern seaboard to board ships. So during that time that soldiers were preparing, the Red Cross was preparing too. The Red Cross Central States region, which Nebraska was a part of, started to reach out to local chapters and ask them to establish canteen services along the way for soldiers. Grand Island had established a canteen committee early on, with Henry Schiff serving as the committee chairperson. However, the work to establish the canteen and get it operational was taking longer than expected. As the troops began to move across the country, Grand Island started to see an increase in traffic of soldiers. On May 1st to May 2nd, 1918, 6 trains with 11 to 16 cars each had stopped in Grand Island along their way from the western camps to the eastern seaboard. The soldiers were met at the Union Pacific Depot by no canteen service. So they started wandering through the streets looking for food. From the early days, the community was very supportive of the soldiers, and from those very first trains would meet those soldiers and hail them as conquering heroes. They just had nothing to offer the soldiers in the way of food and rest at a canteen. By June of 1918, the lack of a canteen in Grand Island was causing a real black eye on the community. Residents were reeling from reports that soldiers and sailors who had stopped in Grand Island on their way were reporting back to family and friends, or other soldiers, many of whom were residents of Grand Island, that there was nothing here for them. It was a dead one. It was a waste of time. They had to hunt for food. There was nothing here. It's not like any other town. Citizens began to rise up, and the Independent began to call for action to be taken. They pressed the Red Cross to take immediate action to ensure that a Red Cross canteen was established as soon as possible for those soldiers to restore Grand Island's reputation. And then the great ice cream scandal hit. People were outraged that the Union Pacific restaurant offered ice cream cones to soldiers for 10 cents a cone, when just up the line in Omaha, they were paying only 5 cents for ice cream cones. Something must be done. These soldiers shouldn't be paying their own money, and they shouldn't be paying double in Grand Island what they're paying in other communities. There was an outcry, and the editor of the Independent pushed the Red Cross even further to take immediate action. Chairman Charles Ryan of the Executive Board assured the community that something was going to happen, and something was going to happen soon. Henry Schiff, who was the chairman of the Red Cross Canteen, resigned from his post on July 8, 1918. Now, Mr. Schiff, we do need to say, was not a slacker. He was very involved in the war efforts. He was the owner of a local restaurant, and he had a son in the military too. He just had a lot on his plate, and unfortunately, with so many things on his plate, he wasn't able to get the canteen open and operational. So Chairman Ryan appointed Elizabeth Meyer in charge of the Red Cross Canteen Committee. Chairman Meyer and her committee got straight to work. Within a few days, they had drafted a prospectus, requested permission from the Union Pacific to use their old depot, as the new Union Pacific depot had just opened. The old depot lay vacant just to the side of the new depot. She requested from Trainmaster Weir permission to use the depot, which he sent on to Omaha. As she waited for permission from the Union Pacific Railroad to keep the old depot open through and standing through the rest of the war, Chairwoman Meyer got to work establishing her committee, organizing her troops, and preparing to open the canteen. While waiting for the news on the depot, Chairwoman Meyer appointed 2 assistant commandants and captains to oversee units of 10 canteen workers. Mrs. A.W. Henrietta Stern was appointed the first assistant commandant, and Mrs. M.E. Minnie Hurst was appointed the second. There's some confusion regarding the unit captains. The history of Hall County lists 9 captains, including Clara Barton, Edith Clary, Louise Frank, Effie Greer, Olga King, Jane Pender, and Laura Richards, and Rose Scott, and Mrs. Irma Wolstenham. The Grand Island Independent lists 2 additional captains, including a Miss Wilcox and Julia Grandel. Each captain was assigned to oversee a unit of 10 workers. With the canteen leadership in place, Chairwoman Meyer directed her captains to begin preparing for the troop trains and directed their uniforms be made for the canteen workers. The Red Cross had specific regulations about canteen workers and their standard uniform, which included aprons, coats, dresses, and hats with the Red Cross shield at all times when serving troops. The standard uniform for Red Cross workers was a blue dress that had a white collar and cuffs worn over a full-skirted apron. Indoor caps were made of heavy white material and had a pointed brim. When working outside, the canteen workers were expected to wear a double-breasted blue coat with a red flag flannel lining, a single row of 4 standard Red Cross black buttons, and a 3-inch wide belt made of the same material. Their winter hats matched the uniform color with a band of red flannel on the crown, and their summer hats were black straw hats with a black ribbon band. The Red Cross insignia with ARC Canteen Worker in small blue letters were placed on the coat, apron, cap, and hat. Within 1 week of submitting her request to the Union Pacific Railroad, Chairwoman Meyer received news back that her request was granted. The Union Pacific would let her use the old depot next to the new depot, and leave the building standing for the duration of the war. With the location secured, the troops organized, the uniforms being made, the community gathered, and supported wholeheartedly the canteen efforts through their fundraising efforts. Local farmers reported they would donate a percentage of their harvest directly to the canteen service. 1 month after Elizabeth Meyer took charge of the Red Cross Canteen, they opened to their first soldiers. On August 12, 1918, the canteen officially opened. The first soldiers to arrive were given small care packages that included gum, some cigarettes, postcards, and magazines. The soldiers were enthusiastically supportive of the work of the canteen and very appreciative of the efforts of the Ladies of the Red Cross. The Independent declared that the work was a worthy endeavor and the men of the community should support the women who were running the Red Cross canteen with financial support. The directives for the canteen were that they were not to prepare food in advance. Rather, they were to be ready on a moment's notice to meet the incoming troop trains. The railroad would notify the ladies of the canteen when a train would arrive and how many soldiers were expected to be on it. Then they would call up the units in alphabetical order to prepare the food and arrive at the depot. The depot was staffed from 8 a.m. to 10:05 p.m., which was the time of the last train that left Grand Island, by 3 workers who would serve as hostesses at all times. Those were the people who were responsible for contacting the other members of the Red Cross Canteen Service to provide the food and be ready for the soldiers. Sometimes the soldiers had special requests of the canteen. The ladies of the canteen did as much as they possibly could to support special requests of the soldiers coming in on the trains. However, one such request in March of 1919 was delivered too late for the ladies to be able to deliver on. There was a request coming in from an incoming train for 150 pies. They didn't have enough notice to organize the baking and delivery of pies, but they didn't want the soldiers to be disappointed. So the ladies in Hall County actually sent word ahead to the ladies in North Platte to let them know of the request to the soldiers. That extra 4 hours between Grand Island and North Platte was enough time for the North Platte canteen workers to organize the baking and delivery of 150 pies. So when the soldiers arrived in North Platte, they were met by their special delivery pies. The work done by the ladies in Grand Island and Hall County in support of the Red Cross and other wartime efforts was so enthusiastic that perhaps there were some things that they were letting slide. The Grand Island Independent implied that the women of Grand Island were so enthusiastic about their war work that their husbands were seen spotted around town with large safety pins on their coats where their buttons should have been, implying that perhaps they weren't taking care of their wifely duties at home. However, the ladies in Alda had a tongue-in-cheek reply for the Independent and the men of Grand Island. They informed them that pincher clothespins worked just as well to keep their coats closed. Throughout the fall of 1918, the canteen in Grand Island continued to host trainloads of soldiers who were grateful for the warm hospitality they received. One such grateful recipient for the hospitality of the ladies of Grand Island was Major Charles McGrath. After leaving Grand Island, McGrath wrote back to the ladies of the Red Cross Canteen to express his appreciation and conveyance that his troops were grateful for the courteous treatment they received while in Grand Island. With the outside world coming to Grand Island, a new danger was coming to the community. In 1918, as a pandemic was raging across the globe, soldiers arriving in Grand Island on trains were bringing with them disease. The ladies of the Red Cross were performing not only food services for these soldiers, but they were performing motherly duties too, like sewing buttons back on coats, and they were working in very close proximity with the soldiers. The local Board of Health asked the Red Cross to temporarily shut down the canteen to protect the women working in the canteen from needlessly being exposed to disease and to protect their families and friends from being exposed from the workers who were bringing home illnesses with them. However, the work of the Red Cross was deemed too essential to the community and military operations. The canteen did shut down for just a few days and then opened back up again and continued to work at full force. Only 3 months after the canteen opened, war was declared in Europe. Germany surrendered on November 11, 1918. While this might seem the end of this chapter for the Red Cross Canteen in Hall County, it actually started one of the busiest parts of the canteen service, because all those troops that had traveled through Grand Island from the eastern or western camps to the eastern seaboards were now having to travel back home as they arrived on ships back into the eastern seaports, and they were then transported across the country back to their homes. However, these soldiers that were coming home were often in a different condition than the soldiers that had left for war. Many of them came with disease and illness, and they also came with injuries from the war. Special trains would carry the most injured soldiers. However, many of the soldiers who came back carried some part of the war with them. The work of the Red Cross ladies of Hall County did not go unnoticed by the soldiers. They would enthusiastically report back on the treatment they received in Grand Island. One of those soldiers, Corporal George Burrows, had actually been born in Grand Island before moving to Salt Lake City. As he passed through Grand Island with 600 soldiers bound for Salt Lake City, he enthusiastically told them, "Boys, I was born in this little city." January 1918 marked 5 months of service to weary travelers at the Grand Island Canteen. A report of service from August 12th of 1918 until January 1st of 1919 found that 44 trains with 3 to 15 coaches each had stopped at the City Depot Grand Island. During that period, 37,375 soldiers and 150 nurses were served in the canteen. An accounting of distributed items stated that 19,088 cigarettes, 1,183 boxes of matches, 11,177 postcards, 2,476 packages of gum, 7,080 chocolate bars, and 105 crates of fruit had been passed out to the soldiers. In the dining room, canteen workers had served more than 4,788 sandwiches, 214 dozen cookies, and 358 gallons of coffee. Just after the initial canteen report was made, the Red Cross workers would encounter some of their busiest weeks. From January 1st to January 16th, 1919, 6 trains stopped in Grand Island with 1,945 soldiers and 300 wounded men on board. Soldiers who stopped at the canteen in Grand Island told the ladies that the food that they got there was just as good as the food that their mother made. They were enthusiastic and very appreciative for the work being done on Grand Island. And while the community of Grand Island and Hall County enthusiastically embraced the soldiers, that wasn't the case in every other stop along the way. One troop train that stopped in Hall County in September of 1918 was full of soldiers who complained to the canteen workers that they had been called out by the local law in Cheyenne, Wyoming, who told them they were tired of soldiers coming into town and making all kinds of noise, and they should make less noise while they were there. The soldiers thanked Grand Island for their warm welcome, and as the train pulled away from town, the soldiers lit up 3 cheers for Grand Island. Hip, hip, hooray, hip, hip, hooray, hip, hip, hooray. Soldiers that stopped in Grand Island were treated to other things, not just at the canteen. The community, as I said, was very appreciative of the soldiers. If the soldiers had more time in town, they would often be given rides around by citizen in motor cars. The owner of the Mayhew Theater, when one train had stopped for a longer period of time, gave permission to entertain the the 279 soldiers on board in the theater. When film came up about the war going on in Europe and the U.S. soldiers and sailors, the young men in the audience were enthusiastically clapping and cheering and stomping their feet. One ship train that stopped at Grand Island for a longer period of time was so appreciative of the community that they actually formed an impromptu parade through the downtown streets of Grand Island. In March of 1919, the Canteen report indicated a very active month with 4,314 men served and 225 sick or wounded men passing through the community. The Canteen workers distributed 3,050 sandwiches, 283 gallons of coffee, 1,248 donuts, 32 dozen cookies, 8 cakes, 25 pies, 14 quarts of milk, 2,779 cigarettes, 193 boxes of matches, 649 postcards, 1,210 pieces of gum, 35 boxes of apples, 2,124 boxes of 24 chocolate bars, and 15 dozen pickles to the soldiers. On May 5th, 1919, as the Canteen service was starting to wind down, Grand Island saw its first hospital train passing through, with 4 cars full of 166 soldiers. The train coming into town had its own dining car for the physicians, the nurses, the Red Cross workers, and the injured soldiers on board, so there was no need for the Canteen service. However, Chairwoman Meyer requested the people of Grand Island come to the depot to meet the train, bring bouquets of flowers, cards with well wishes for the soldiers as they arrived. When the soldiers arrived in Grand Island, they were met by 3,000 people who gave them bouquets, well wishes, and prayers for their continued journey. The soldiers reported they hadn't received such a hearty welcome in any other community they stopped at along their way. July 24th, 1919 was actually the last operation day for the Canteen, but it didn't happen at the Canteen. On that day, the citizens of Hall County gathered together at Schiff Lake, south of Grand Island. It was one of the largest celebrations in the history of the county, with between 6,000 and 8,000 people in attendance, or approximately 1/3 of the entire population of the county. Union Pacific offered train trips from the depot down to Schiff Lake, back and forth all day long, ferrying passengers. Every soldier that attended was given a free sandwich, drink, ice cream from the Canteen service, with citizens of the community paying for their own sandwiches to help support and offset the cost of operations. That day, the ladies in the Red Cross served up 12,000 sandwiches. At the end of the night, after the last train had left, the cars stretched from Schiff Lake all the way to Grand Island, headlight to tail light, the entire way lit up by people who had enjoyed the celebration, the lectures, the games, the music, and of course the fireworks, to celebrate the end of the war and to celebrate all the sacrifice and contribution the people of Hall County had made to support the war effort. On August 8, 1918, almost 1 year after the first date of service, the Executive Committee Chair submitted his final report of Hall County Red Cross activities. The largest expense incurred for the chapter was $4,654 that was paid to the Central Division of the Red Cross for the memberships and magazines. The next largest expense, for $3,429.37, was for Canteen operations. The Independent reported that the Canteen service had overcome some quite firm opposition in the beginning, including a concern that there was going to be an overdue burden on the citizens of the community, with an unusually large number of trains stopping. However, the reporter asserted that the excellent service had been provided in the Canteen, and when compared to all of the good work the ladies of the Canteen did, the cost was insignificant. The Canteen service in Grand Island was part of a larger network of canteens within the Central Division of the Red Cross. The final report of the Central Division showed that 4,101,412 soldiers and sailors and Marines were served from December 1917 to November 1919 in the canteens located in Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Nebraska, and Wisconsin. The Canteen in Grand Island served 57,890 servicemen from August 12, 1918 until the Canteen was finally decommissioned. The Central Division reported the average cost within the division was 6 cents per man at the Canteen. Using the average, the expected cost for the service of the 57,000 men in Grand Island would have been $3,473. The average cost is very close to the actual cost the Canteen service reported. The Central Division reported that the average cost within the division was 6 cents per man served in the canteens. Grand Island also spent approximately 6 cents on every soldier they served in the canteen. The Grand Island Independent reported on August 8, 1918, that it should be remembered that the advocates of the canteen service had to overcome some quite firm opposition. Through no doubt conscientious opposition, it being urged that the expense at the station would have, with an unusual number of trains, would have made it almost impossible. A most excellent service had been provided to the members of the community. The Independent stated that the most excellent service had been maintained and excelled any other place in the state. Although the canteen service had a slow start, the citizens of Hall County enthusiastically supported the war effort from home. As the 57,000 soldiers passed through Grand Island after the canteen opened in August of 1918 until they closed their doors, soldiers were met with a warm meal, a warm smile, perhaps a hug, and just a touch of what they might have expected at home before they shipped off to war and as they were coming back from the battlefields. The citizens of Grand Island need to be remembered, their service and sacrifice, and we hope that with sharing this story with you, the forgotten story of the World War I Red Cross Canteen here in Grand Island will be forgotten no more. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you would like to support the work of the Hall County Historical Society, we encourage you to become a member. We strive to preserve and protect the stories and artifacts of Hall County. You can also follow us on social media or visit our website. We're found on Facebook at Hall NE History, and our website is www.hallnehistory.com. If you like this video or any of the videos on our YouTube channel, we encourage you to subscribe to show us that you really support this work and you'd like to see more of it in the future. This is our last virtual program of the 2020-2021 Voices of Past program season. We hope to welcome you all back to Burlington Station in the fall of 2021 as we launch our 2021-2022 program season, hopefully back in person again. We've missed all of you this year, and we can't wait to see you again in the fall.